Hello and welcome to PFF Wire. I am Doug Kyed, joined as always by Brad Spielberger. Brad, happy Thanksgiving Eve. How you doing?
Happy Thanksgiving Eve. I'm just watching the World Cup. I'm apparently a soccer sharp. Ben Brown can attest to that. For some reason, my bets are hitting on these soccer games I know nothing about, so I'm doing well.
I love that. Years and years and years ago, I had like a crazy 9-team parlay in college football when I have only really ever cared that much about University of Washington, and I hit on it. So I think sometimes knowing less is better when it comes to betting. Less thinking is better. I'm kidding, kind of course. But before we get into our show, make sure to subscribe to PFF Plus. Right now, we are running a promo code PFF35, 35% off PFF Plus subscription. So that is a great deal. No better time to subscribe to PFF Plus. There's a lot of news today. So let's get straight into our first segment, which is Fresh Off the Wire. And I have a take. Quarterback situation in the NFL, it's gone off the rails. We've got Sam Darnold starting this week. We might see Trevor Siemian starting for the Chicago Bears, depending on Justin Fields' health. Kyle Allen has replaced Davis Mills as the Texans starting quarterback. Bryce Perkins probably going to start for the Los Angeles Rams this week. Mike White replacing Zach Wilson. I think we've had like 47-ish quarterbacks start so far this season, but it feels like this is the week now where everything's gone to hell. You've got all these backup quarterbacks starting, and this is when really kind of start to separate the haves and have-nots in the NFL.
Beautiful poetry, some symmetry with Zach Wilson getting benched the same day that Sam Darnold gets his starting job in Carolina. I think part of that is because one more missed game for Baker Mayfield all but guarantees the Panthers will send a 5th-round pick, not a 4th, to Cleveland. I'll stop bringing that up now. It looks like it should be set in stone based on the snap percentage there. But yeah, it is getting a little bit off the rails. I think to a degree also, of course, quarterbacks matter a ton, and we talk about them a ton because they are the most probably important position in all of sports. But there are 52 other players that matter a ton, and you have to keep the locker room intact. And of course, I'm particularly speaking about the New York Jets here. But for the other players, hey, we want to see what we can do with this guy. Maybe his ceiling is lower, but his floor is higher. In Houston, a guy like Brandon Cooks maybe would be happy to play with someone like Kyle Allen. I think, I'm still Mills Mafia till I die. I'm still a believer. But yeah, I think we are reaching that inflection point where it's now about, let's see what we have, whether it's even for a backup for next year. I think both Mike White and I know Kyle Allen's a pending free agent, but long answer short, it is. It's kind of the time of the season where now we say, all right, it's enough about evaluating and now about either trying to make the playoffs for the Jets or trying to figure out what you're going to do in 2023 for the Texans and some others.
The word love and playing with Kyle Allen is a little bit strong, but real quick pop quiz for you, Brad, because this is something I looked up right before we started, or actually a couple hours ago. Kyle Allen on the 2019 Carolina Panthers. How many games do you think he started that season?
I know that Rivera ended up trading a 5th-round pick for him when he went to Washington, so I'm going to guess he had a decent run. I'm going to go with 7.
13. Unless I'm completely insane and like saw this wrong, but I was like, Kyle Allen started 13 games for the Carolina Panthers like 3 years ago. That seems nearly impossible, but that's the case. Let's talk about the Jets first, though. We talked about the Jets quite a bit and the quarterback situation on Monday's show. They pulled the plug on Zach Wilson. He is benched, as I mentioned, Mike White to start. That in itself is not overly surprising. That's Mike White over Joe Flacco because at the end of last month, Mike White overtook that backup job from Joe Flacco. Now he's set to start. Joe Flacco is going to be the backup. A little bit of a hard reset for Zach Wilson. Maybe we see him again before the end of the season, but he will not be active in this game on Sunday. But I don't know. I think that you said the same thing on Twitter. I probably would have still started Zach Wilson in this game against Chicago on Sunday. I've seen what he could do against the Chicago defense, which is quite a bit easier than the New England Patriots defense, and then maybe pulled the plug on him halfway through the game, benched him in the middle of the game. But they bit the bullet, benched Zach Wilson on Wednesday. Mike White knows that he is starting, and you mentioned it off the top. Yeah, I think that this gives the Jets a chance to see what Mike White looks like, not as a presumptive starter moving forward, but as a backup, because he is a free agent after the season, and they've got a ton of different options going into next year if you assume that Zach Wilson is not going to be the starter. And their smartest approach might be to add a veteran quarterback, plus draft a guy like Hendon Hooker in the second or third round. And then if that rookie isn't ready to be a backup, then maybe Mike White could be that guy. And now he's got an audition to see if he can be.
I think more smart teams, that's kind of what you described as the Jalen Hurts approach, right? With taking a guy behind your franchise number 2 overall pick, just like a Carson Wentz, that is trending in the wrong direction. Obviously, a bit of a different situation with contracts and all that. But I will say this. I think from a pure football standpoint, they probably hated to make this decision. I think if Zach Wilson did go to that podium and had a better answer to that question, this may have not happened. I know you mentioned, okay, Broncos, Patriots, Bills, by Patriots. Those are all top 5 defenses in EPA per play allowed. The Bears are bottom 5 in the NFL. It was the most beautiful get right spot, build confidence for your young quarterback, but you're in the mix of the playoff hunt. You should be 7-4, even with Mike White, with all due respect to my Bears, because it could be Trevor Siemian. I say that with a tear rolling down my cheek. You have to, let this defense dominate. They are second in pressure rate in the NFL right now. The Bears are allowing the most pressures. The defense could win the game alone in some rainy conditions, but outside of the narrative, I pulled some stats as well. So, touchdown passes for Zach Wilson, over 571 attempts with the Jets, 13. Touchdown passes from Joe Flacco and Mike White, over 329 attempts. So 100 or 250 fewer pass attempts, also 13. And then I think even bigger one is the sack rate. Zach Wilson's getting sacked on 9.2% of dropbacks. Flacco and White, 4.3%, less than half. So you're just not letting your team win games. You are making mistakes that are simply fundamental football issues. He can't hit screen passes. He can't do the little things. It's not like he's just not hitting downfield. He can't even do the quick out and screen stuff that we're going to see. Mike White might throw 40 balls to Michael Carter and whoever on Sunday. You can win games with a defense this good. Wilson was so bad, you couldn't even let the defense just win them games.
I think the other thing too is that I feel like, Flacco or Mike White has the higher floor than Zach Wilson, just because things have gone so disastrous for him this season, especially in recent weeks against some of those top tier defenses. But I would actually also say that at least like this season for Zach Wilson, compared to the game that Joe Flacco played against the Cincinnati Bengals this year, or I think it was also a game last year that Mike White played against the Cincinnati Bengals, where he had 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, over 400-yard passing. It honestly seems like the ceiling might be higher with those guys at this point too, because Zach Wilson hasn't been able to do that, at least this season. I didn't get a chance to look too heavily into whether he had any 400-yard, 3 passing touchdown games last season for the Jets. I don't really remember it, but those other quarterbacks have. And it's a bit of a roller coaster when you've got, Mike White or Joe Flacco, but it's the same roller coaster when you've got Zach Wilson. If there's a fear of losing the locker room, then I think that you have to make this move. And the Jets defense is, I think, second best in EPA per play against, right behind or in front of, however you want to say, the New England Patriots. Their secondary is incredible this season. They've got a great pass rush. CJ Mosley is making a lot of plays in the middle of the field. So it unfortunately for the Jets, this is a lost season just based on the quarterback situation. Like, even if they make the playoffs, they're not going to go very far, whether it's Zach Wilson, Mike White, or Joe Flacco. But I think that you need to maintain the locker room this year, keep everything in place, and then next year is when you really know that you can make a run if you figure out that quarterback position.
Robert Saleh has been in this position, and we joke, but it's serious. If this Jets team this year had Jimmy Garoppolo, and it's pretty funny to think if, let's say his shoulder is healthy and he gets traded before the season, they're like an 8-win football team that we're talking about as, hey, again, maybe they're a little bit limited at quarterback, but they could make some noise in a really talented AFC, playoff picture because of how good the defense is. They've obviously have great playmakers, a lot of young players, but Garoppolo can get the ball to players in space and let them go to work, and they have that talent. So it is. I think you have to make this move. It is, though, kind of a lost season to not know and to not even have the runway to find out what you have in Zach Wilson, or you do know, and it's not a good, prognosis.
Breaking news here while we are talking or while we're live. The Jaguars just claimed Darrell Henderson off of waivers from the Rams. Bit of an interesting fit there. I think the Jaguars could certainly use some running back depth after trading away James Robinson to the aforementioned New York Jets. We can talk about that in a little bit. I want to talk about Davis Mills, benched for Kyle Allen, as I mentioned off the top of the show. I understand benching Zach Wilson. I understand needing to see what you have in Mike White. I don't know. I mean, I don't totally get benching Davis Mills at this point. I feel like clearly he's not the guy. Clearly they're another team that's going to have to head into next season, drafting a quarterback high, whatever it is, Derek Carr, Jimmy Garoppolo, one of those other options. But I don't know. I just don't totally see the point in making the switch now to Kyle Allen.
If I was Bryce Young's realtor, I'd be surveying the Houston market really closely, or whichever, CJ Stroud, Will Levis, insert name here. I mean, we knew he was not the guy, but I think, honestly, people will mock this and whatever. That's a great 67th overall pick. He was good enough to start for 2 years, not particularly well, but your team was kind of awful around him. And I think even if he stays, he's a cheap backup that is at least starting caliber. Again, that's a loose definition of the term, but it is kind of a weird move. I mean, they're not trying to lose, but they kind of seem like they are trying to lose a little bit. I think it's, again, more of a, hey, we're trying to sell a meritocracy and sell the locker room on. We're going to see different options. Kyle Allen is the journeyman that apparently started 13 games for the Carolina. It all comes back to Carolina Panthers quarterbacks, right? Like, it's just sort of the traveling Carolina Panthers quarterback.
Good Lord.
That's the NFL story the last couple of years. But, yeah. So, I get it, but I agree with you. I really don't get it at the same time. Why not just let Mills play through it, play it out, see what you have? I mean, they're not benching Kenyon Green in favor of a, depth guard that isn't going to get, what do you have, a 0 pass block grade last week? So
every week,
I know it was a first-round pick and all that. But anyway, now I'm on a soapbox. But I'm a Mills Mafia till the day I die, like I said.
Okay, so Kyle Allen actually started 12 games, so I misspoke, but he played 13 games that season. I will say, Kyle Allen in his career, 24 touchdowns, 17 interceptions. You do worse than that, but I don't know. I just still feel like you should probably see if Davis Mills can rebound a little bit this season. I know it doesn't ultimately matter because they're going to make that switch at quarterback next year anyway, but just not necessarily something that I was expecting. If I could buy stock in Davis Mills having like a 15-year career as a starter, backup, fringe guy, I would buy all of that stock right now. A little bit more of a serious note here. The Cardinals fired their offensive line coach / run game coordinator, Sean Kugler. That was for a incident in Mexico while the Cardinals were down there before playing the 49ers. He was sent home before the game. That was for groping a woman, according to ESPN. And I mean, I don't know. There's nothing really to say there other than what a moron, obviously, gross behavior. But to do it in Mexico, it's just what are you doing? Also, I don't know. Yeah, there's not much to say there, but it's bad.
I mean, they're getting some credit for making a swift move, and not to pile on, they probably only made a swift move because earlier this season, their running backs coach got accused of domestic battery involving children, and they didn't do anything for 5 or 6 months. So I know there are some great people that work in that organization. I know some people there that I respect and like, but I mean, Steve Keim, the GM, hey, he's had multiple DUIs. I mean, it's just and again, tie back to football. I mean, it's just. Yeah, it's not always about football, and sometimes the disorganization and dysfunction of the people at top. How can we expect the players to show? It's like Washington to a degree, where you almost feel bad and say, they're being run by people that maybe shouldn't be in those positions. Very unfortunate to see. I guess glad they made a swift move, but I'm not really giving them too much credit, frankly.
One other note on that, I think it was Josh Weinfuss of ESPN said that he had asked Cliff Kingsbury yesterday if there was any coaching changes that had occurred. And Kingsbury said no, and then it was reported an hour later or something like that this had occurred, and clearly they knew that they were going to be firing him. They sent him home from Mexico. I think that, as a head coach, not to get on my own soapbox as a media member, but I think there's a difference between dodging a question and just outright lying in response to it. And I think that Cliff Kingsbury gets away with that because there's not a major media conglomerate. Like there's not a ton of media members in Arizona. No one really cares that much about the Cardinals. No one follows them that closely. Their news conferences are at 4 p.m. when everyone's getting off of work. So he can get away with those things. And you might say to me, like, dude, you covered the Patriots for 8 or 9 years or whatever. Like, this is what Bill Belichick does. This isn't really what Bill Belichick does. When Bill Belichick doesn't want to answer a question, he says that it's a hypothetical. Like, he doesn't outright lie. He dodges questions. He won't give an answer. But I don't think that he would say, like, is there a coaching change coming? I don't think he would say no. He would say, I don't know, we're going through some things, or that's an in-house issue, or like he'd say something else rather than just like no. And I don't know. It's something that we've kind of brought up a decent amount about Cliff Kingsbury recently with all the injury things that happened there too. But I don't know. I think that you don't need to lie as an NFL head coach, even if it's going to give you some sort of advantage. There's another way to handle that situation, especially when it's as serious as that one is in Arizona. One other note on the Cardinals. Kingsbury said that Kyler Murray was definitely trending in the right direction to start Sunday against the Chargers. Kyler Murray said that he is expecting to start, and he was a full participant in practice today. So I wouldn't trust Cliff Kingsbury on that, but for Kyler to say that he's expecting to start and for him to be a full participant, it does seem like Kyler will likely be playing this week against the Chargers.
Yeah, we'll see if we maybe finally get to see Marquise Brown and DeAndre Hopkins play together. I know Brown maybe still sits out for this one more game, then they have the bye. But they have, I mean, when they get those two guys in the field together, Rondell Moore did get dinged up in Mexico, but also a solid underneath option. Of course, Ertz now out for the season. But to tie another news story of the day, that apparently per Jeremy Fowler and Dan Graziano at ESPN, that Sean Payton, one of the teams he'd be interested in coaching, hypothetically could be Arizona if they make a change at head coach, which I do think is possible, especially if he was in charge of hiring his coordinators and assistants. But they have like a lot of talent on offense. They really, really do. Once we see them all out there together, and maybe if that does happen against the Chargers defense that is just still so bad, they got to fix the defense. They don't really have cornerbacks to speak of. The offensive line is an issue, but they have the potential to become a very high-octane offense if they can get everyone healthy on the field together.
I know you have to give up a draft pick for Sean Payton, but I feel like it's easier to fire a head coach or fire GMs, whatever it would be, to hire Sean Payton than it is to kind of be like, okay, we have to go through that whole search, and then you wind up, hiring Ben Johnson for the line, something like that. Like it becomes understandable. And I think it's an easier transition when a guy like that becomes available to actually make a move at head coach. So we'll see if that is coming for the Cardinals, but they are not off to a good start this year. I did miss a piece of news here. Sam Darnold will be starting, as I mentioned off the top, for the Carolina Panthers. They're just going through that like every single quarterback that they've got there. And quite honestly, I don't hate this move. They've tried it with PJ Walker. They've tried it with Baker Mayfield. You might as well throw Sam Darnold out there at this point.
Yeah, the one relevant note for kind of fantasy or betting or whatever, he does love to pepper DJ Moore with targets. His target share is sky high when Sam Darnold plays. They obviously don't have much talent elsewhere, but in particular, Darnold seems to love just throwing it to him and feeding him as much possible. So if you're a fantasy, roster of DJ Moore, he might be worth throwing in the flex spot or back even in a wide receiver spot at this point. But yeah, I also think when you invest $18.8 million in this 2022 season for Sam Darnold, you might as well get a little bit of juice out of the squeeze if you're paying that much.
Tony Yayo in the comment section saying Davis Mills greater than Zach Wilson. And,
Facts.
I actually agree with that. Also said Texans should hire Sean Payton. Payton will have Bryce Young to mold. It's another one where it'd be like a little bit easier to get out of Will Smith if Sean Payton becomes available and if he's interested in going to Houston, which not so sure about that portion of it. All right, Kadarius Toney dealing with a hamstring injury that should not come as much of a surprise to Giants fans. We'll see how long he's out, but Juju Smith-Schuster, I believe, is expected to play this week. We also got Carson Wentz for the Commanders designated to return to practice, but Taylor Heineke will remain the starter. I have a wild stat about that a little bit later, but any thoughts on Kadarius Toney or Carson Wentz return?
I think it's fascinating. We discuss trades and everything, and fans of both teams or even just analysts of the game try to break down the value and all that. And we've literally seen why Kadarius Toney was valuable and interesting to the Kansas City Chiefs, and also why the Giants were happy to move on with the soft tissue issues. And apparently, they knew the inevitability of him dealing with hamstrings and stuff like that. And he's already, right back into that situation. But again, we saw the tantalizing talent with his touchdown catch and all that he could do. So it's just it's interesting. We see both avenues play out in like a 2-week span.
It's got that tantalizing touchdown talent. Some good alliteration there from you, Brad. One other piece of quarterback news, or two other pieces of quarterback news. I'll do this one first. Matthew Stafford just ruled out for this week. So, as I mentioned off the top, looks like Bryce Perkins will be starting for the Los Angeles Rams. And yeah, this is just same, different than the Jets, but also just a lost season for the Rams this year.
Facing the Kansas City Chiefs, who are 14.5-point favorites, which frankly might not be enough points in this game. No. Yeah, it totally a lost season and different where, I mean, they're old and trending in the opposite direction. This is the Jets. Yes, it's a lost season because your quarterback question is still a question, but you can lean on, all right, let's go find a veteran or do whatever, and everything else is in place. With the Rams, I mean, how many years left of Aaron Darnold and elite Jalen Ramsey do you really have? He looked pretty, honestly pretty bad. What was it, against the Saints? He got cooked by Chris Olave in the deep touchdown. So, I mean, I'm sure he's still going to be a great player for a couple more years. But nevertheless, I mean, again, just kind of like I talked about Kadarius Toney, we're seeing the both sides of, hey, going all in and it might lead to a Super Bowl. If Jaquiski Tartt catches that interception against the Rams last year in the NFC Championship game, and then the Rams had this season they're having right now, the entire national narrative would be that the Rams all-in approach was the dumbest thing in the history of the NFL. But because they got that ring, which, hey, it's all it takes, we're not having that conversation.
Absolutely. I know you've been dying to talk about this all day. Justin Fields, day-to-day, you will be at that Bears game in New York. So this is a little bit more complicated than the other quarterback situations. Justin Fields says that his injury is a separated shoulder with partially torn ligaments, basically an AC joint injury. He said that if the game were today, Fields would not be able to play, but he still has 4 more days to see how it all evolves. Honestly, I mean, you're not going to want to hear this because I doubt that you want to watch Trevor Siemian versus Mike White, but I don't know. I don't think it really benefits Justin Fields to play in this game.
It doesn't. I will say this. I've spoken with, first, our doctor at PFF, Mario Pilato. Go follow him on Twitter. He's great for all the kind of breakdowns, and he does not, I think, overreact and try to get things out fast. He's cares more about being accurate and being right, and does a great job with that. So he said, and also another doctor I spoke to, he could play. He can play. There's not really a high risk of re-injury. It's that should he play? Because, the Bears are 3-8 now, and like I mentioned, they have one of the worst pass blocking units. The Jets have one of the best pass rush units. The game's going to be in the rain, so I might be sitting there in the rain watching Trevor Siemian battle Mike White. I'm go to the liquor store after the show to stock up for Sunday. No, but all jokes aside, I mean, I think he's going to want to play. Like, frankly, I think if it's up to him, I think he will play. It's more of a pain tolerance and a pain management issue than I think he could make this worse or cause further injuries. I mean, the Bears had Mitchell Trubisky had the same injury to his left shoulder, AC joint. He wore a harness and played through it. And he basically, just like Fields said today, every throw on the follow-through, I'm feeling it and it hurts, but I can do it. So, selfishly, I want to see him play, but, it probably is smart for their draft position, for his long-term health, to just let him rest and heal. They have a bye week coming up as well. But again, for the last time, please, Justin Fields play.
Just for a guy who runs as much as Justin Fields does, and like you said, I mean, the offensive line issues, the Jets pass rush, plus, and you see a guy like Baker Mayfield last year try to play through a non-throwing shoulder injury. He's terrible. It tanks his career. I'm not saying that Justin Fields is in the same situation here, but I mean, every stat matters, every grade matters, everything matters when it comes down to a long term for every player. And Justin Fields is on a hot streak. You'd hate to see that go away and for him to start playing worse because of a injury to his non-throwing shoulder that he doesn't need to play through. One other final piece of news: Marcus Williams designated to return from injured reserve. That's a big boost for the Ravens secondary.
Huge. Yeah, so Kyle Hamilton, their rookie first rounder, is now our highest graded safety in the NFL, and they get back Marcus Williams, who he signed for 5 years, $70 million. That secondary is starting to play a lot better, too. Marcus Peters, Marlon Humphrey, healthy and playing like that we expect them to. A couple safeties in the back end, even without Marcus Williams, we're playing good football. So, the Ravens are turning the corner, 7-3 now, playing good football, and that is a massive, I think, bringing him back to defend some of those deep passes. They have been susceptible to some stuff over the top. That's what he is. He's that center fielder type guy. Hamilton can play down in the box and do different things. They're trending in the right direction. It's kind of crazy to say about the Ravens. They're getting healthy and trending in the right direction. It feels nice to say that about the Ravens after the past couple of years.
Definitely. Before we get into Wild Stat Wednesday and some fancy news and notes, PFF Wire is sponsored by Western and Southern Financial Group. We focus on your roster moves. Western and Southern helps advance your money moves. buying your first home, planning to start a family, wondering how to make your money grow. Western and Southern's playbook of life insurance, investment, and retirement solutions helps you rest assured on game day. Team up to understand needs and address goals with a game plan built just for you. Get started at westernsouthern.com/PFF. All right, Wild Stat Wednesday. We started this last week. It was a huge hit. Everyone's clamoring for more, so we're going back with it today. This is something I actually tweeted out on Monday, and I'll go first. Commanders quarterbacks. I mentioned earlier, Carson Wentz designated to return. Taylor Heineke will continue to start. Carson Wentz on 232 passing attempts this season. Commanders dropped 13 of his passes. Taylor Heineke on 148 passing attempts. The Commanders have dropped none of his passes this season. That's according to our PFF charting data. And it was funny when I tweeted this out. Like a lot of Commanders people, retweeted all that stuff, got a lot of responses. And a lot of the responses that I got were, what's with this Carson Wentz, anti-Carson Wentz narrative? It's not his fault that guys are dropping passes. Like, this is a stretch to criticize Carson Wentz about. Listen, I just tweeted out the stat because it's insane. The fact that, and quite honestly, if I had to point out that stat as a negative or positive for Taylor Heineke or Carson Wentz, I would honestly say that ultimately it's a negative for Taylor Heineke, because that's going to see some regression at some point. Players are going to be dropping his passes. It's unsustainable for him to go this long without any drop passes. So Taylor Heineke is playing, out of it, or not out of his mind, but he's just been so lucky with so many of these different things, with turnovers, dropped interceptions. Taylor Heineke has had 5 dropped interceptions this season. Carson Wentz only has 3. So the joke I made was that somehow he's throwing a catchable football, but an uncatchable interception. I don't know. Obviously, you have to ride with Taylor Heineke while the Commanders are winning. It's working for them. He seems to be the better guy in the locker room, all those things. But you also have to acknowledge that he has been very, very, very lucky for Washington this season. And at some point, that's going to come back to bite them.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I would say kind of a random anecdote, but drops are obviously subjective. Our film graders, we think, do a phenomenal job, but we are actually more forgiving than other places. Like Pro Football Reference and others will actually give more drops to wide receivers. We kind of tend to, was it contested? Were there other factors? Yada yada. So that number really is, I think, pretty glaring. That Wentz had 13 in that stretch, and honestly, we hear about the cliche of throws a catchable ball and all that, but I think there's probably something
to it.
Yeah, there's definitely something to it. So. My Wild Stat Wednesday, and before I start, Travis, I promise your agent didn't tell me to say this. Travis Kelce, the tight end for the Kansas City Chiefs, has 20 more receptions, 300 more receiving yards, and 6 more touchdowns than the next highest tight end in all 3 of those categories. His 11 touchdowns are more than twice the next highest tight end. It gets even crazier. In half-point PPR fantasy football leagues, the gap between Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews, who is number 2, is the same as the gap between Mark Andrews and the 38th tight end in fantasy points on the season. He is having a truly ridiculous year this season. It is historic how the gap between him and the rest of the players. If you drafted Travis Kelce to your team, you're probably winning your league or doing very well in your league, because you can't match his production. So yeah, like I said, I didn't accept any money to say that. When I post it later, Travis, I hope you see this. But yeah, all jokes aside, I mean, it's unbelievable, too, because the Chargers were trying to focus on him. They lost Tony early in that game. I didn't have Juju Smith-Schuster, didn't have a lot of their weapons, and it did not matter. He just kept making guys miss in the open field, kept scoring touchdowns. He's ridiculous.
Yeah, and last year it honestly looked like he might be, starting to take a slight step down. He's come back very strong this year. And yeah, just to your point on, catchable passes, uncatchable passes, I think that Carson Wentz does throw a much harder ball than Taylor Heineke. So I think that that's part of it. Doesn't explain the dropped interceptions so much, but it can explain the dropped passes. And I wrote last year about how, Patriots wide receivers thought that Mac Jones was throwing a very catchable ball. I think we actually did a study that said that drops do trend a little bit more towards wide receivers than they do to quarterbacks. But I think that it all correlates and it all deals with arm strength and velocity and knowing when to ramp up that velocity. All right. Usually we do fantasy news and notes on Fridays. There are 3 games on Thursday because it is Thanksgiving. So happy Thanksgiving to everyone once again. So let's just run through these real quick here. Bills are favored by 9.5 points in Detroit. Point total in that game, 54.5. We've got the injury report here for the Bills. Linebacker Tremaine Edmonds out and then also defensive end Greg Rousseau is out. Much longer injury report for the Lions. Guard Evan Brown, defensive end Charles Harris, guard Jonah Jackson, cornerback Jeff Okudah, and defensive end Josh Pascal are all out. Wide receiver Josh Reynolds is questionable, and wide receiver Jameson Williams did return to practice this week, but Dan Campbell said that he is going to be back in December. So we will certainly not be seeing him on Thursday in such a short week against the Bills. But this is I'd probably lean a little bit more towards the Bills in this game, but the Lions are on a bit of a hot streak right now.
Playing good football, and I think the emotional toll that the Buffalo Bills had to take with everything they dealt with the 6 feet of snow, flying out on Saturday, playing and going back to Buffalo. But yeah, they did get to play at Ford Field 2 games in a row now in Detroit. I mentioned last week how good Josh Allen is indoors. His numbers are kind of crazy. And then, yeah, the Lions should not have Jeffrey Okudah at corner in this game. He's in a concussion protocol. And you mentioned both guards did not practice, and then center Frank Ragnow limited. Daquan Jones and Jordan Phillips and Ed Oliver and those guys in the interior for Buffalo have been so good. But I will say, so when they lost Gregory Rousseau, since then, they're 19th in EPA per play allowed. No Gregory Rousseau, no Tremaine Edmonds in this game. The total of 54.5 is one of the highest in the entire season. I want to say it's a top 2 or 3 total. Yeah. As much as, look, these are good offenses against, the Lions defense is terrible, and the Bills is not playing good right now. It's still so many points for a noon game on a Thursday. Right. I almost want to take the under, but it could be like 40-25 for all we know in this game.
It is funny. It's funny to have the Bills on noon or 12:30, whatever it is, on Thanksgiving, because I feel like that early Thanksgiving game is always like kind of sleepy. Obviously, the Lions are always playing in it. I feel like it always is off to kind of a slow start. We'll see how it looks in this game because these can be 2 very high-powered offenses. But, yeah, with all the injuries – with the fact that the Bills are in their second home for a second week in a row, I do feel like this is going to be probably a big Bills win, but we'll have to see. Next game up here is the Giants and Cowboys. Cowboys are favored by 10 points at home over the Giants. Point total in this one, only 45.5 for the Giants. A lot of players out. Tight end Daniel Bellinger still dealing with the eye injury. Cornerback Adoree Jackson. Cornerback Fabian Moreau. And then on the offensive line, Evan Neal, Shane Lemieux, and Josh Zudu. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. And John Feliciano all out. And then questionable, you've got Andrew Thomas, Tyree Phillips on the offensive line, Richie James, wide receiver, safety Jason Pinnock, and safety Dane Belton. Cowboys have a little bit of a shorter injury report here. Anthony Barr is out with a hamstring injury. Terrell Basham and Jonathan Hankins are doubtful with illnesses. And then questionable, you got Dante Fowler, Kelvin Joseph, DeMarcus Lawrence, Osa, don't know how to pronounce his last name. There we go. Micah Parsons, Neville Gallimore, and Donovan Wilson. I know that you were heated about the fact that Micah Parsons was back in a 40-3 game when he was already dealing with multiple injuries. Now he's questionable for this game. If some of those guys on the Cowboys are able to play through the questionable injuries and everything, I don't know. That right after beating the Vikings 40-3, the Giants are dealing with so many injuries on their offensive line. I'd be leaning towards probably the Cowboys and the over in this game.
Yeah, so the Giants have 4 offensive linemen that have started games from this season that are not going to play in this game. And then you mentioned, the highest graded tackle or one of the highest graded tackles in the NFL, and Andrew Thomas has been limited on a short week coming off the loss to the Lions. I think it definitely could get pretty ugly. But yeah, not to make this rant again, but the fact that the Cowboys, there was a video today of, Micah Parsons wanted to play so badly and it's so cool. It is cool. I mean, it's awesome he's that competitive and wants to play. You're supposed to protect your players. He then said, I got rolled up on it. The whole defensive line fell on my leg. I've never felt a pain that bad in my life. And people were trying to be like, oh, well, he wanted to play. Yeah, of course he wanted to play. He's a football player. He loves doing what was put on this earth to do at an extremely high level. So, that bothered me because I think the Cowboys might be the best team in the NFC. I think if they add Odell Beckham Jr., I genuinely think that is a legitimate claim to make. Even without him, I think they're a really good team trending in the right direction. I also like, too, Dak Prescott for us now is top 10 graded against the blitz. We know Wink Martindale and the Giants love the blitz, especially without Adoree Jackson at corner. CeeDee Lamb if they're looking for a prop to bet, CeeDee Lamb over receptions, over receiving yards, has already moved 3 or 4 yards this week because I think that's a big factor. He's by far their best corner. That is Adoree Jackson. And obviously CeeDee Lamb's a great player, but getting fed lately. So, yeah, it could be an ugly one for sure. But again, with these short turnaround Thursdays, you never particularly know.
No, absolutely. Last game here, you've got the Patriots and Vikings. Vikings favored by 2.5. Point total in this one is 42.5. For the Patriots, right or left offensive tackle, I don't know which side they would be planning to play him at. Isaiah Wynn is out with a foot injury. David Andrews, their center, another tackle, Yadnik Adjust, both questionable. Also, cornerback Marcus Jones and wide receiver Devontae Parker questionable, but I would expect those guys to play. And for the Vikings, cornerbacks Andrew Booth and Caleb Evans both out. Offensive tackle Christian Darrisaw is out, and defensive tackle Dalvin Tomlinson is limited. This game is so tough. Vikings coming off the 40-3 loss to the Cowboys. Patriots defense is one of the best in the NFL, and their offense is one of the worst in the NFL. And overall, the Vikings are just middle of the road or worse, pretty much no matter what metric that you look at. They've been playing really conservative football, just coming off that loss to the Cowboys. I think this is a winnable game for the Patriots, but the 2.5-point line is so tough because it basically ensures that if the Vikings, if the Vikings cover, they're probably going to win. I don't know. I think I'd probably lean towards the Vikings in this game, if only just because I feel like the Patriots need to prove that they can beat a team that's decent on offense and on defense. And that's pretty much the best thing that you can say about the Vikings is that they're not terrible on offense or defense. They're kind of middle of the road on both sides.
Vikings are 8-2 and have a -2-point differential. You talk about all the various metrics you can look at to talk about why they're just not as good of a football team as their record. I think that one probably sticks out the most. I think the Christian Darrisaw thing is massive, though. I mean, he was our highest graded tackle going into the week. Left the game against Dallas when it was still a football game. Once he left, it turned into a rout. And it was because whoever they lined up against, Jake Brendel on the left side, was just getting, he was getting obliterated. And Micah Parsons had, I think, 2.5 sacks. I think they all happened after Darrisaw left the football game. And as you've seen, I mean, Matthew Judon is having a career year right now. Dietrich Wise is playing really good football. It moved off a key number. So you mentioned the 2.5. Yeah. It was 3 to open the week and has moved in towards the Patriots, which I think makes it a very interesting teaser leg if you want to tease the Patriots with another team, get them up to 8.5, which I think they will cover, at the least cover that. But I hear you. I mean, the Patriots, yes, they have this top EPA per play allowed, but they've played a lot of really bad quarterbacks throughout their season, which certainly helps and honestly can dictate that to a large degree. But I don't know, man. It's Bill Belichick. I said this when they played the Jets last week. I said Garrett Wilson had 115 receiving yards on 9 catches against the Jets. Bill Belichick went to the bye week and said, we're going to hold this guy to nothing. I think he had 1 catch for 6 yards or 2 catches for 5 yards. Justin Jefferson is maybe the best wide receiver in the NFL. You're not going to stop Justin Jefferson. But if I trusted anyone in the NFL to limit Justin Jefferson, it's Bill Belichick. So I'm leaning their direction, but I would have liked it more when they were a full +3. Now that it's +2.5, like you said, I mean, they got to win outright at that point.
Yeah, pretty much. I will say that in this game, 42.5 is a low point total. I might still take the under in that one. When I was putting together like DraftKings showdown lineups and everything like that, I have the Vikings and the Patriots defense in my lineup just because the Patriots defense has been so good and because Patriots offense has been so bad that, the Vikings defense isn't incredible or anything like that, but teams have just been able to stop Mac Jones and that Patriots offense so well over the last few weeks. They were nearly as anemic as the Jets on Sunday. They only scored a field goal on offense. It took the Marcus Jones punt return for the touchdown for them to actually win that game. So that actually might be my best bet of the week is to take the under in that game. I didn't actually look at PFF Greenline to see which way they're leaning on that one, but I don't know. It just feels like it's going to be a grinded out Sunday night game there between the Patriots and Vikings. But what's your best bet for the weekend?
Yeah, no, the logic's certainly there. With for the whole weekend or for Thursday. So I'll go for.
For Thursday. Yeah, for Thursday.
Yeah, we'll talk more on Friday. Yeah. So honestly, I know you love the Bills. It is more of a narrative bet and more of an emotional bet and all that. But I do like Detroit +9.5. Only because I'm just betting on the Buffalo Bills team just being depleted of energy and everything they had to deal with. It certainly could play out terribly and they could lose by 40 points. I wouldn't be surprised at all. But I kind of like them to just to fight, to battle, to get a good Dan Campbell Thursday. They're used to playing this game. Like you said, they play it every year. I think they lose, but I think they can keep it within 9.5 points.
All right. I like that. I mean, yeah, it's been a tough week for the Bills. And I was, talking to some people around the organization, and like players last week were like barely able to run. They were like with the snow and everything like that, they were barely able to practice. They still grinded out against the Browns last week. So I'm not sure if this week recharges them or if they're still, exhausted from last week and what happened with the snowstorm and everything, the short travel, all that to Detroit. But it should be a decently fun slate of games this weekend. I know that the lines are pretty high in those the two early games, but yeah, I mean, there's certainly a path for the Lions to be competitive against the Bills. The point total is so high that it should be a high scoring affair. And then the Giants have obviously, probably exceeded everyone's expectations, played better than they should all season, and we'll see if they can continue to do that against the Cowboys. But at the very least, it's an NFC East rivalry game between the Giants and the Cowboys, and that's not what you always see on Thanksgiving.
It's the Odell Beckham Jr. Bowl. I mean, I think he's probably, I would imagine, would rather be a Cowboy. But all right, before we let you go, I know we're wrapping up here, but very important question. I might judge you on the answer. Your favorite Thanksgiving side, what is it?
I think it's actually probably green bean casserole. I know that that's not the most popular one. My mom makes a really good green bean casserole. I love the little French onions that go on top. It's just been a favorite of mine forever. But I would, if pies count, then I'd probably throw like pumpkin pie in as well as the top Thanksgiving side. But what's yours?
I think pie should count, and pumpkin to go. I probably would lean pecan pie or apple pie of the pies, but I'm very equal opportunity pie guy. I think a good garlic mash. You just need it on your plate. Get a little bit of the au jus in there from the turkey. It's got to be a good one though. You can make some bad mashed potatoes, but a quality, a really high level garlic mash or stuffing / dressing. Those are different things. I've lived in the South. Those are different things. But anyway, stuffing or dressing probably number one. But a good garlic mash goes a long way.
Yeah, stuffing is great. So what is it? Is dressing when it doesn't go in the turkey? What's the difference between the two?
So my understanding, and I could be wrong, but dressing is generally more congealed. Like a stuffing could be kind of loose breadcrumbs, and it's not, whereas a dressing is more of like a, not a pie, but it's you get a piece. You could cut a piece of dressing, whereas a stuffing could be crumbly and kind of the pieces fall apart.
Interesting. Well, I think that we typically have dressing then in our house, but we will be hosting Thanksgiving this year. It's been a little bit crazy to get the house ready and everything like that. The wife always gets a little bit stressed out when we have to clean up the house and be taking care of a crazy 5-year-old and a crazy 1.5-year-old. But hope you have a good Thanksgiving. Hope that everyone who's listening and watching enjoys the games, has a delicious meal, has a fun time with their family. I'll mention it again. Make sure to subscribe to PFF Plus using promo code PFF35. That is 35% off, an already great deal. Subscribe to the PFF Wire podcast on Apple and Spotify. Make sure to rate and review. Also download the PFF app. I'm telling you guys to do a lot of stuff right now. Take notes, do it all. Follow Brad on Twitter at PFF_Brad. Follow me on Twitter at Doug Kyed. Keep it on PFF.com for all of your news and analysis. And we will be right back here with you on Friday to update injuries and everything like that for the upcoming slate of weekend games as well. So don't think that you guys have gotten rid of us so soon.